The upcoming Valorant nerfs in Episode 7 Act 2 has divided the community quite a bit, so I thought why not make a video discussing the changes and giving my opinion on them. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. Let's start with Breach, shall we? His ultimate points will be increased from 8 to 9 and his Aftershock will have less delay due to it having less ticks. I agree with them increasing his ult points as the Valorant devs have realized that more teams at the pro level have been prioritizing ult orbs, which will result in more ults being required. They want the game to be more gun focused, which makes sense as it's a tech shooter at the end of the day. Plus, ults can really change around, so I can see why they want players to get their ults less, especially if it's a huge area of effect ult like Breach that can get you tons of kills and can almost guarantee a round. I don't think the Aftershock nerf was the most necessary as that ability is not that amazing at the end of the day. But this will affect Breach's power both in ranked and pro play, which I guess is what Riot wants, as Breach is used on certain maps quite a lot in pro play and they want to encourage more diversity in its agents. But it's not that major of a nerf, and I think some of the other agents were hit with much harder ones. Brimstone's ult points will be increased to 8, which I think is a reasonable nerf. The whole point is that Riot wants the larger area of effect ults to have less impact on rounds, which is what Brimstone's ult does. It's so good for clearing space and stalling for post plant, so I can see why they tweaked this. Fate will also be getting a slight nerf with her pull-out time of a gun taking a lot longer to happen after she uses her Prowler. This one I don't really get, since I believe Fate was in a perfect spot with her being balanced, so I see no reason to nerf her like this. She does not get picked as much in ranked or pro play, so yeah, I don't really get it. Now let's talk about Gekko, who has gotten some buffs that I like and some nerfs. The Mosh Pit now does 10 damage per second when it's on the ground before it explodes. Wingman's HP will be reduced from 100 to 80 and Trash's explosion will be much easier to see. The Mosh Pit buff is really good as it now encourages players to respect it more and treat it more like a molly. Before, people would just run through it as it took a few seconds for it to do massive damage, so it was very easy to counter. Now players will have to think about it more as it will actively damage you. As for Wingman's nerf, I'm not really the biggest fan of it because it was already so easy to destroy due to him being so slow when he sees you. Being able to see Trash's explosion more clearly right now is going to be very helpful, as it could be unclear to see the area it has affected at times before this update. Overall, I think the changes to Gekko will help him quite a bit, but I don't know if it's enough to make him a much more viable option in ranked and pro play. Killjoy's lockdown is getting increased from 8 to 9 ult points, which is really needed. She's the most dominant agent of the game right now, so if she wasn't here on this list, it would be a really questionable decision. I still think this won't be enough to encourage teams to pick the other Sentinels, as I believe she is still very powerful, but it's a step in the right direction. Omen is also getting changed where his velocity will no longer affect his paranoia ability. I don't think this change affects him that much, as it wasn't really a big factor in the first place. In fact, if you ask most Valorant players about this, I'm sure most of them would have never realized that the speed at which you were moving affected Omen's blind. Skye has been the most picked initiator recently, so it makes sense why she's getting a ton of nerfs. Her Guiding Light, which is basically her flash, can only be casted for 2 seconds now instead of the previous 2.5 seconds. Her Trailblazer and Seekers will have reduced HP along with her ult points increasing. The Guiding Light is a good nerf as it's such a good information gathering tool. At least now, it limits the areas that you can check with this flash due to it lasting less longer, which is a good thing. The Trailblazer's HP getting reduced is another nice nerf, as it felt incredibly hard to destroy it at times, especially at the speed that it can travel. Her ult points being increased is decent as well due to it being such a good ult for only 7 points, especially when the rest of her kit is so powerful. The Seeker health decrease is a good thing as well due to it being able to gather tons of information. Overall, I think the nerfs for Skye are well done and will probably affect her peak rate a bit, but I still think it's not enough. Her Trailblazer is still the best initiator drone in the game due to it lasting the longest, and her flashes are still decent for gathering information. More changes are needed to get her to the level of the rest of the initiators, but I think this is a good step in the right direction. Out of nowhere, they decided to nerf Sova's recombo to only have the ability to scan 2 times. I guess they did this to keep it in line with the drone only having 2 tags, but I don't think this is the most necessary thing to do right now, as I feel like Sova is in a decent place. I guess they did this as the new map pool might see Sova being picked a little more with Breeze being added back and maybe the potential new map. The next nerf we have is Viper Spit, now requiring 9 ult points instead of 8, which is totally reasonable. She is completely overpowered in pro play and even in ranked if you know how to use her. Especially with Breeze being added, which is an essential Viper map, I can see why they want to nerf her. She does the job of being a controller and a sentinel so well, which is why she is picked so much, and her ult is really good. She probably will need more nerfs in the future, but this is a nice change for now. Astra has gotten some buffs and nerfs which have made her slightly worse in my opinion. Her gravity well startup time is getting doubled, and the duration is getting decreased from 2.75 seconds to 2 seconds. Her stun ability, Nova Pulse, will have a decreased startup time from 1.25 seconds to 1 second, and now you won't be able to hear any sounds on the other side of the Cosmic Divide wall. I think the Cosmic Divide change is really good and makes Astra's ult a much bigger threat, which is really decent in my opinion. Now people will have to respect it more and be more careful. I get what they were trying to do with the Nova Pulse and Gravity Well changes, as they wanted to make the Nova Pulse be able to compete with the Gravity Well ability. But in my opinion, a mere 0.25 seconds decreased startup time of the Nova Pulse ability is not enough to make it good. It's too small of a change. The Gravity Well nerf now has much less stall time and is easier to run through it now due to it taking a much longer time to start up. So at the end of the day, this feels more like a general nerf to Astra than it is a buff. Hopefully they manage to balance her abilities better in the future patches. Now let's talk about the agent that got hit the hardest. Poor Jett. Her tailwind window is now getting decreased from 12 to 7.5 seconds, and the activation time will be increased by 0.25 seconds. The cloud burst time will be reduced by 2 seconds, and it will take longer for you to equip your weapon after you cast it. Updraft will be reduced to 1 charge, and her Blade Storm will increase from 7 ult points to 8. This may be controversial, but I think the Jett nerfs are reasonable. She has been a meta agent for so long, and I think it's time for some new duelists to take the spot for a while. The Tailwind nerf makes sense, as it will now make you think twice about taking a defensive off angle due to the higher risk. Get out of jail free cards should be used minimally in this game and should be more high risk, so I'm glad to see that they nerfed it a bit. She can still enter a site perfectly fine with a dash, so it's not all bad. The Cloudburst nerf also makes sense, as it almost acted as a second dash to escape a fight, and I can see why they wanted to reduce that option. It makes you think twice about the fights you take. The Blade Storm nerf is decent as well, as it was a really good tool you could use on eco rounds, and you could jump around while being super hard to hit with it. This kinda goes in harmony with the updraft being nerfed, as you now have less opportunities to updraft really high and kill someone from really odd angles. Overall, I think these are reasonable changes, and it hasn't killed her too much. I feel like people are just overreacting since a lot of people picked Jett. She will still be a decent entry fagger, and I'm sure she will still see some play. So yeah, that's all the changes. Some of them I think are decent, like making the big ults that are almost round winners have less of an impact, and nerfs on meta agents such as Jett and Skye. Still waiting for more Killjoy changes though. But was a nerf on Sova, Astra and Fade really necessary? I don't feel like they are that dominant in ranked and pro play right now. I feel like Riot should also try to buff some of their weaker agents like Phoenix, Sage and Deadlock, but I get they want to be super careful with that because they could end up in a power creep situation similar to what Overwatch was at one point. But at the end of the day, Riot can always revert the changes in future patches and introduce new ones, so it's not the end of the world. Don't worry about it. So, what do you guys think of the new changes? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments below. And with that being said, this has been 2367 Ruben signing out.